The war was over. Berlin was burning. And somewhere beneath the collapsing ruins of the Third Reich, the women who had once lived like royalty were waiting in silence. The wives, the mistresses, the mothers of Hitler's inner circle. Women wrapped in silk while Europe starved. Women photographed smiling beside men planning industrialized death. Women who believed the empire around them would last forever. And then, suddenly, it was gone. No servants, no palaces, no protection. Only interrogations, ruined cities, children carrying cursed surnames, and a question that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. What happens to the family of evil after evil loses? Because when Nazi Germany collapsed in May 1945, these women didn't disappear with it. Some ran, some lied, some defended the dead until their final breath, and some carried the ideology forward long after the guns fell silent. This is the story of the Nazi princesses and the nightmare that began after the war ended. The first was Hitler's own sister-in-law. A sentence so bizarre it almost sounds fictional, but in the final hours of the Third Reich, it became reality. Her name was Gretl Braun, the younger sister of Eva Braun. And on April 29, 1945, while Soviet artillery shook the foundations of Berlin, Adolf Hitler finally married Eva in the suffocating underground bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. Less than 40 hours later, they were dead, which meant Gretl Braun suddenly became Adolf Hitler's widowed sister-in-law. The irony was grotesque. Just months earlier, Gretl had been part of the glittering inner court orbiting Hitler like royalty around a dying king. In June 1944, she married SS General Hermann Fegelein in a lavish ceremony surrounded by some of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Himmler stood there. Martin Bormann stood there. Champagne flowed beneath mountain skies at the Berghof in Eagle's Nest, while Europe drowned in blood. 3 days later, Allied troops stormed Normandy. The beginning of the end had already arrived. They just refused to see it. By early 1945, Berlin no longer looked like a capital city. It looked like the end of the world. Buildings split open, smoke crawling through the streets, sirens screaming through the night, children carrying rifles bigger than their bodies. Eva Braun returned willingly to Hitler's bunker. She chose to die beside him. But Gretl stayed behind at Obersalzberg. She was pregnant. And somewhere deep inside her, life continued growing while the Reich collapsed around her. Then came betrayal. Her husband, Hermann Fegelein, fled Berlin during the final battle. He abandoned the bunker, abandoned Hitler, abandoned survival itself.
When Hitler's guards found him hiding in civilian clothes, drunk and desperate, the atmosphere underground turned poisonous. Because this wasn't just desertion anymore. It came immediately after Heinrich Himmler secretly attempted negotiations with the Allies behind Hitler's back. Paranoia flooded the bunker corridors. Hitler exploded with rage. Martin Bormann whispered into his ear. Eva Braun begged for mercy. None of it mattered. Fegelein was dragged into the Reichschancellery garden and shot. Somewhere far away, Gretl still believed she had a future. Days later, hiding in the Austria resort town of Zell am See, she gave birth to a daughter. She named the baby Eva, a child born into the ashes of a dead empire, named after a woman already rotting beneath the ruins of Berlin. But the war wasn't finished with her, because hidden away inside Fishhorn Castle were secrets, photographs, jewelry, private letters, home movies, even personal correspondence between Hitler and Eva Braun, fragments of a vanished kingdom. Gretl trusted the wrong man. A friendly German refugee convinced her to reveal where everything had been hidden. He was actually an American intelligence agent. Within hours, the illusion of privacy vanished forever. The archives disappeared into Washington. Some of them would never be seen publicly again. And then came the silence. No more ceremonies. No more mountain retreats. No more SS guards. Only memory. Her daughter Eva would later commit suicide after losing her fiancé in a car crash. Another life swallowed by grief. Another shadow left behind by the Reich. And by the end of her life, Gretl herself no longer recognized the world around her. Alzheimer's erased the final traces of the woman who once stood beside Hitler's empire, as if history itself had begun consuming its witnesses.
But if Gretl Braun witnessed the collapse of the Reich from its edges, Heinrich Himmler's family experienced something colder, something more intimate. Because Himmler lived two lives. To the German public, he presented himself as the perfect guardian of Nazi morality, disciplined, controlled, fanatically devoted to order. But behind closed doors, the architect of terror was living a lie. His wife Marguerite had married him before power transformed him into one of the most feared men in Europe. She was older than him, practical, a nurse, interested in herbal medicine and homeopathy. At first, their life almost seemed ordinary. Then the SS grew, and Himmler disappeared into darkness. Meetings, executions, concentration camps, late-night trains moving east. Soon he barely saw his family, except for one person, his daughter, Gudrun. The child adored him. Photographs show her smiling proudly beside her father during official ceremonies, completely unaware of the machinery of death operating behind the polished uniforms. At least, that's what many later claimed. But one visit would follow her forever. Gudrun accompanied her father to Buchenwald concentration camp, a child walking calmly through a place soaked in terror. History would never forget that image. And while millions suffered under Himmler's empire, he quietly fell in love with another woman, his secretary, Hedwig Podhast. Younger, softer, a hidden second life. Himmler wanted to divorce his wife and marry her, but publicly condemning immoral behavior while secretly committing it himself would expose the hypocrisy at the center of the SS. So instead, he kept both worlds alive. A wife, a mistress, children in separate homes, even as Europe burned. Then came July 20th, 1944. A bomb exploded inside Hitler's Wolfslair headquarters. Smoke. Chaos. Blood on conference tables. The assassination failed. And on that exact same day, Himmler's mistress gave birth to his daughter. While officers were being hanged with piano wire in Berlin, a newborn entered the world carrying the blood of one of the Reich's most powerful men. The contrast feels almost impossible. But war is full of impossible things. By 1945, the illusion shattered. American troops advanced through Germany. The SS empire cracked open. Files burned through the night. Himmler's wife and daughter fled south through collapsing roads crowded with refugees, broken soldiers, and terrified civilians. Then the Americans caught them. Interrogations began immediately. Prison camps. Transfers between countries. Cold barracks. Floodlights. And eventually, Nuremberg. The city where the regime would be dissected before the world. Gudrun sat there listening as her father's crimes were exposed piece by piece. Witnesses. Documents. Mass murder reduced to paperwork. But instead of rejecting him, she became obsessed with defending him. The experience hardened her. Years later, Gudrun Himmler would become royalty within neo-Nazi circles. To extremists, she wasn't just a woman. She was Nazi bloodline. She spent decades helping former SS officers escape consequences through underground support networks. Old men responsible for torture and murder received sympathy, money, protection. And through it all, Gudrun never abandoned her father's memory. Not once. Even into old age. It was as if the war had never truly ended inside her mind. Martin Bormann's family looked perfect from the outside. Huge family, smiling children, Christmas photographs beside Hitler. The Nazi ideal. But inside the walls of the Berghof, the marriage was slowly rotting. Gerda Bormann worshipped Hitler with near-religious fanaticism. She also tolerated humiliation, because Martin Bormann cheated constantly. Actresses, mistresses, affairs hidden behind official meetings, and somehow the regime normalized it. Gerda even supported the bizarre idea of parallel marriages, believing elite Nazi men should produce as many Aryan children as possible. Morality had become twisted into ideology. Their children played in gardens beside Hitler's mountain retreat while concentration camps expanded across Europe. Then Berlin collapsed, and Martin Bormann vanished into the smoke during the final breakout from Hitler's bunker. One moment he was there, the next, gone. Dead? Escaped? No one knew. Meanwhile, Gerda fled into the mountains with 10 children. 10. Imagine the exhaustion, the fear, the silence during those nights. Then came arrest. American interrogators quickly realized something else was killing her. Cancer. By 1946, Gerda Bormann was dying in a hospital bed at only 37 years old. The Reich had promised eternity. Instead, it left behind widows, orphaned children, and terminal illness. After her death, Catholic priests raised the children. And one twist stunned even historians. Martin Adolf Bormann, named after Adolf Hitler himself, eventually became a Catholic priest, the son of Hitler's inner circle, dedicating his life to the church. History has a cruel sense of irony.
Joachim von Ribbentrop's world collapsed differently, not with gunfire, with humiliation. Once he had been Hitler's elegant diplomat, the polished face of Nazi expansion, a man obsessed with status, wealth, and appearances. But by the end of the war, nobody respected him anymore. As Germany disintegrated, Ribbentrop abandoned his family and disappeared into hiding. British SAS troops eventually found him living in a filthy apartment beside a young woman. The powerful foreign minister of the Third Reich, reduced to a frightened fugitive. His wife, Annaliese, had helped build his ambition from the beginning. Strong-willed, aristocratic, domineering. Even Hitler reportedly joked that she wore the trousers in the marriage. After the war, she was dragged into internment camps while Allied investigators attempted to strip away the family's wealth. But she fought viciously through the courts, not out of guilt, out of entitlement. Even after the executions at Nuremberg, she defended her husband publicly for the rest of her life. No remorse, no collapse, only bitterness. And perhaps that's one of the darkest truths buried beneath the ruins of Nazi Germany. Not everyone learned anything. But no Nazi wife embodied luxury more completely than Emmy Göring, the actress who became the First Lady of the Reich. If Berlin was a royal court, she was its queen. Lavish gowns, jewels, private trains, stolen paintings hanging from palace walls. While cities burned, Hermann Göring collected treasures like a king preparing for immortality. Unlike many Nazi leaders, Göring genuinely loved his wife and adored their daughter Edda with almost obsessive devotion. The child lived surrounded by fantasy, custom toys, miniature palaces, extravagant gifts paid for by the Luftwaffe, while German families dug through bombed ruins searching for food.
But inside Hitler's inner circle, resentment simmered constantly. Emmy Göring openly looked down on Eva Braun. To her, Hitler's girlfriend was socially beneath them. The tension became so toxic that Hitler himself reportedly intervened. Even dictatorships collapse into petty human jealousy. Then the bombs came. By 1944, Allied aircraft turned German cities into infernos. Entire neighborhoods vanished overnight beneath waves of fire. And Göring, once commander of the mighty Luftwaffe, became a symbol of failure. Hitler's trust evaporated.
Then came the fatal mistake. In April 1945, believing Hitler trapped and doomed inside Berlin, Göring attempted to assume leadership of the Reich. Martin Bormann seized the opportunity immediately. He poisoned Hitler against him. Treason, betrayal, cowardice. Suddenly, Göring, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, became a prisoner inside his own estate. Outside, bombs shook the mountains. Inside, the family waited in terror. No one knew whether the SS would execute them. Then, the Reich collapsed completely. American troops arrived. The guards vanished. The illusion ended. Göring still believed he could negotiate personally with Eisenhower. Even then, even after everything, he believed he mattered. Instead, American intelligence officers arrested him as a war criminal. His wife and daughter were dragged into internment camps while investigators searched through mountains of stolen art, jewelry, and hidden wealth. And then came Nuremberg. The courtroom lights, the cameras, the world watching. Hermann Göring loved the attention. Until the sentence came. Death.
On the night before his execution, he swallowed a hidden cyanide capsule. One final act of control. One final escape. And afterward, Emmy and Edda were left alone with the ruins. Their mansions gone, their empire gone, their future poisoned by a surname. But Eva Göring never condemned her father. Not publicly, not privately. Even decades later, she defended him relentlessly, as if admitting the truth would destroy the final pieces of herself. And maybe that was the real curse carried by the children of the Third Reich. Not just guilt, inheritance. Because long after Hitler died, long after Berlin stopped burning, long after the trials ended, the shadows remained. Inside family names, inside memories, inside children raised beside monsters. Some changed, some denied, some devoted their lives to protecting the dead. But none of them escaped history. Because the fall of Nazi Germany did not end in a bunker beneath Berlin. It echoed across generations. In suicides, in silence, in bitterness, in loyalty, in shame, and in the quiet, terrifying reality that evil rarely disappears all at once. Sometimes it simply survives behind closed doors.